Okay. Hi, good day. You're welcome to this tutorial session with Frank. I would like to say a happy new month to everyone joining us this day. So in our previous lessons, we've talked about the EQ, the compressor. Today, we're going to talk about one very important part of your mix, which is the gate, right? So the gate is it's a device or a part of your mix that allows for, or an element in your mix that allows for you to knock off undesirable sound, unwanted sound out of your mix. Unwanted sound out of your mix is called what's it called now? It's called noise. So if you check, a lot of times what you will find, it is called noise gate, right? So the noise gate allows for you to be able to open or close the entrance of every signal so that you can take just the desirable sound out of the signal line. So most signal lines will usually come with a noise or a bleed or a humming noise from any other component outside the signal line, right? So let's say for an example, let me bring something from our previous class. That is that when we talked about the transient of a sound, right? When we talk about a signal, so the signal has the transient, has the decay time, right? The decay time, as it decays, the time of the decay can be cut short by the compressor, by the gate, right? So let's go. Let me do a bit of explanation on the gate so that we can understand how it works. Then we can be able to give you what's it called now, an example of how it can be used, so that it's easy for you to implement it when you come across any board, being digital, analog, or any DAW. If you find your compressor, sorry, your gate. So the gate, the noise gate. Right. A typical noise gate will have threshold, right? Threshold, hold, release, range, right? Threshold, release, hold, attack, range. So in the analog section, you will find that they are all knobs, right? The threshold that we have said over time, threshold is in decibel, which is the unit measurement for volume, right? So the threshold is in dB. The release will be in time, which is in milliseconds. The hold also will be in time, which is in milliseconds. The attack will also be in time, which is in milliseconds. The range will be in dB, which is the volume. So the range, we talk about the attenuation of attenuation. By that I mean the decrease or increase in the volume level. It's the attenuation. So, and the attenuation will have to work with the range in the gating of any unwanted sound, right? So on this part, all of this on the analog board will be a knob, but I'm going to illustrate on the digital board, which is represented as a graph. Remember the first time we talked about it, we said on the digital board is usually plotted horizontal over vertical. With what I have just said here now, you will already realize that what this graph will look like will be volume over time, because the parameters that are here is just the threshold, and every other thing is in time. So it is volume against time, right? Sorry, there's water in this thing. Okay, so let's say this is volume over time, right? Which is in dB over milliseconds. Do you understand? So the gate will be plotted volume over time, right? Where the threshold is the determinant to if the gate will open or close. Like as the name implies, gate. The gate is a barrier between the desired sound and that of the undesired sound, which is the noise, right? So the time for which the gate will pop open will be dependent on the threshold. So if the input signal, which is the audio signal, goes above the threshold, it will push open the gate, right? Just follow this analogy. So if the input signal goes above the threshold, it will open the gate. For the gate to stay open, that means the input signal needs to keep at the strength of the input signal to leave the gate open, right? For the gate to close is that the input signal has gone below the threshold. That is, the input volume has gone below the threshold for the gate to close, right? The time for which the gate will open, that is, the speed at which the gate is opened, is determined by the attack. Do you understand? Then the speed at which the gate will close is determined by the release. Do you understand? The time frame for which the gate will close is determined by the hold time. So if the signal goes below the threshold, the hold time tells the gate to stay hold for this period of time before you shut it down. Do you understand? So let me illustrate on the graph. So let's say this is our threshold. Let's say the dotted part is our threshold. We have set our threshold to 5 decibel, right? I hope you can see it. So we've set our threshold to 5 decibel, right? So in this point, I'm going to illustrate how to use the gate to knock off unwanted noise, right? That is the unwanted sound, the unwanted signal, be it hiss, be it humming, be it an overtone from any device, right? So if you remember, we said the transient and the decay time, right? So if the decay time of any audio signal is longer than what we desire for that particular signal, we can literally cut it short by using the gate. Understand again, let me go over it. So the gate will open if the input signal goes above the threshold. 1. It will stay open provided the input signal is above the threshold. 3. The gate will shut if the input signal goes below the threshold. 4. The time for which the gate will shut will be determined by the hold, right? Then how fast the gate shuts is determined by the release, right? Then the reduction in the volume while the gate is shutting down will be determined by the range. Do you understand? So your typical compressor will have threshold, attack, hold, release, and range. Do you understand? So at this point, we're going to treat an audio signal that is an input signal that has hiss. Let's say the input signal is somewhere below, say this is our, what's it called, that's 5 decibel. Let's say the input signal is somewhere around, let's just say the noise is somewhere around 3 decibel, right? If we move our threshold to 5 decibel, what will happen is the signal will not go through. Understand? because the signal level is below the threshold, the gate stays closed until the signal level is able to push open the gate. If it's able to push open the gate, the signal will flow. Remember, what the gate will do is to close the door from every unwanted signal, right? But if the door is opened by the signal, the noise will flow through with the audio signal. Do you understand? So it will knock off the noise when the audio signal is below the threshold. But the moment the gate is open, if there's a noise signal, it will go through, right? So let's say this is where our noise signal is. Let's use this as the noise signal, right? Our audio signal will stay silent. So this particular channel on your mixer, let's say this is the channel on your mixer, it will stay quiet because we have put a gate there that says nothing should go through, no signal should go through except the signal is above the threshold. So every signal stays below, and then the what's it called? The device or the input signal is left quiet because it's not gone above the threshold. So let's say we now have an input signal. If the guy starts playing, let's just use for an example, let's say the guitarist. The guitarist is playing, and then his volume level is below the threshold. Let's say his volume level is somewhere around 4 dB, right? You will not hear anything because the gate, the threshold, which is the gate, is above the signal level of the input. But let's say in the next, because this is real time, right? So the time just keeps playing. It's just going to keep counting because it is real time. So let's say at some point when it gets to let's say 1 milliseconds, or let's say it gets to 1 second, the threshold, the input signal of this guy goes above the threshold. What happens is the gate is left open. Because at this point, the input signal has been able to open the gate. So the gate is left open. The gate will keep being open for the fact that this signal is above the threshold. So you'll start hearing the guitar coming, but the guitar will come in because if you notice at this point where it is now open, right? The gate is open, meaning the noise signal is also going through. Do you understand? So the audio signal will come to you with the noise, right? Let's say as the guy keeps playing, he keeps playing, it just keeps playing, right? Let's say for this length of time, he keeps playing. The moment his audio signal, that's his input, or the moment he stops playing, what happens is the audio signal drops down. If you remember, we talked about the decay time of every tone. So the decay time, the moment it goes below the threshold, what happens is the gate closes. So this guy becomes a rigid gate. Let's say this is the rigid gate, right? The gate closes. What will determine how fast this gate will close will be, if you remember, I said what will determine how fast our gate will close will be our release time, right? Our release time will determine how fast the gate will close. Our attack time will determine how fast the gate will be open. Let's say if you watch, so I want to open a gate. I want to open a door. Let's just use a literal explanation. So I want to open a gate. I want to open a door. I hold the door and I push it. So the speed at which I use in opening the door is called the attack time. So if I push it, boom, immediately, that means it's a fast attack time. But if I push it open gradually, it's a slow attack time, which means if I do a 0.0 milliseconds, like let's say this is your knob on the analog board, so it runs from maybe 0.0 milliseconds all the way to for an example, let's just say maybe 0.9 milliseconds, right? If I put my knob at 0.0 milliseconds, meaning this is very fast, 0.0 milliseconds is very infinitesimal, it is difficult for your ear to maybe pay attention to that details, but this device will kick into action very fast so that it happens almost immediately. Do you understand? So the speed at which the gate will open is determined by the attack. The moment the attack time is set very fast, what happens is the gate is open almost immediately, right? It pops open almost immediately. Then if we move this attack time backwards a bit, what happens is the gate is popped open gradually, right? If you understand, I was talking about the range and the attenuation. So the volume change of the input signal will gradually go up. Do you understand? So if you push, let's say we want to pass 20 persons outside through a particular gate that can allow for 10 persons to go through at a time. Let's say if we open the gate gradually, what happens is the people can, that if you open the gate that one person can go through, what happens is one person will go in and then go in. So there's a delay time between the first person and the 20th person. Do you understand? But if you do, if you pop open the gate to the point where 10 persons can go through at a time, what happens is the time for which the entire signal can go through the gate will be faster than when it's opened gradually. Do you understand? I hope you understand. So if I pop open the gate fast, what happens is everybody goes through it very fast. But if I pop open the gate gradually, what happens is people go through it in gradually too. Do you understand? So let's say our attack time is set to 0. That means my gate will happen almost immediately. The moment the input signal goes above the threshold, it pops open. Then this time, the time from here to here, it's showing that this signal stays above the threshold for this length of time. So this length of time, the signal stays above the threshold for this length of time, right? The moment the guy stops playing or he starts playing calmly, and then the attenuation of the signal begins to fade, the signal goes until it falls below the threshold. The moment it falls below the threshold, what happens is, if we have set a hold time, do you understand? Hold time, hold the gate for a while. Let's say hold the gate for 20 milliseconds before you gradually close it. These two illustrations is hold the gate for this particular time before you release the closing gradually. So I'm trying to use the terminology in the illustration so that it's easier for you to be able to understand how to use it the moment you see it. So you will hold the gate for this number of milliseconds and then release it. By that release, I meant close it with this space of time. So let's say it has fallen below this and I have set a hold time, right? A hold time. Let's say this is the signal. Now the signal has gone below the threshold. Let's say this is our threshold. The threshold is indicated by a dotted line, right? Let's say it has gone below the threshold. What happens is my hold time, I have said hold this guy for this particular time. So let's say this is our hold. So hold my gate open for this length of time. So this length of time will be the time for which my gate will be left open. At this point, the threshold, the signal has gone below the threshold. So I have told the gate to hold it open, right? Let's say for a typical example would be maybe, let's say for, I want to compress maybe the toms. No, sorry, I want to gate maybe the toms. And then there's the latter part of the tom. If you remember that the transient of a tone, it goes like this until the energy is totally dissipated, which is the transient, which is the highest of it. And then it goes down up to the decay time, right? It decays out, right? Let's say, and I hear my tone, boom, for an example. I'm just giving an illustration. So the boom, if you remember in our previous class, we said that the tone does not totally diminishes. So the vibration keeps going till the energy is totally dissipated, right? So that length of the tone, let's say I want to have a longer tone on my toms, and I need to take it from somewhere here. Let's say the time that it takes for this tone to totally diminish out of the hearing of out of the range of the human hearing is let's say 0.01 milliseconds. Also, let's say 0.08 milliseconds, right? Boom, it goes. Or let's say 0.8 milliseconds, right? Before the tone totally dissipates. If I want to be able to get the entire tone come in and then the gate closes before any undesirable sound comes into that tone, what I will do is I will listen and then be able to know when the entire tone is totally received from that input. Then I can set my hold time to leave the gate open, right? Leave the gate open for this period of time to allow the other part of the tone, that is the decaying part of the tone that is now below the threshold. Do you understand? So most times the transient can kick open the threshold, right? But as the tone stays, it begins to dissipate, meaning the volume level of that tone begins to drop until the point where it is no longer heard, right? As it falls below the point where it's no longer heard, what happens is as it falls below that point, the gate closes. But there's the tail end of that tone that I want to hear, right? That I need to come into the signal before I shut it down. What happens is I will tell my gate to keep it open, right? Allow for this tone to complete its circle first before you shut it down, right? So by the time the tone comes in and then it's completed its full circle, what happens is I tell the gate to shut it down. So let's say this is our hold time, right? Tell it to shut it down, and then this shut it down is close the gate. But in this closing of the gate, shut the gate almost immediately or shut the gate gradually. So sometimes personal preference though, I tend to shut my gate faster if I'm using it for to compress to gate kick, so that I don't have the overtone of the kick that can allow it to begin to ring or all of that. So I can set my release time to be faster than the usual. So it goes, it seizes it almost immediately. So if you set the time fast, what will happen is as it goes through, immediately the gate closes. The gate closes up to shut the overtone from coming in or signal from any other tone from coming in. So what happens is we've done that. Then we now set our release time to be a slow release time or a fast release time. If you remember, our attack time, when I said fast attack time, is fast attack, slow attack. That will be dependent on the time. So if it's in 0.0 something milliseconds, meaning it's a fast attack time. So if it's your knob, in your analog settings, this will be a knob. If you put it at the beginning of the knob, meaning that is a very fast attack time. If you take it backwards, it becomes a slow attack time. By the slow attack time, if you remember, I was describing it that if you take it slower, what will happen is it will take a longer time for the transient of the tone to go through, because the gate is is slightly opening, allowing the tone to come in gradually, right? But if it pops open almost immediately, what happens is the transient pops in, and then you have to now wait for the time that the signal will go below the threshold so that this other part will begin to work. So the the gate stays dormant the moment in two phases. One, right? The door is left closed once the input signal does not go above the threshold, right? Two, the gate is left open once the input signal stays above the threshold. So for the length of time that the input signal will stay above the threshold, the gate is left open. Do you understand? Then for the length of time that the input signal stays below the threshold, the gate will stay closed. By that, with this illustration, I think, so let's say, okay, there's the other part that I have not given you. So this is let's say this is our release time. So the faster the time, the faster the gate will close. the slower the time, the slower the gate will close. You understand? So if I do a fast attack and a fast release, what happens is the door opens and closes almost immediately. Fast attack and fast release, it opens and closes almost immediately. It opens and closes almost immediately. So this illustration, as I'm doing it now, it already can explain how the kick works. So the kick is just beating or pushing a bound of frequency. So it pushes up almost this band of frequency, somewhere on the high end, somewhere on the low end. It just pushes it up. So that band of frequency does not stay for too long and start resonating or beginning to bring in unwanted signal, which is noise. What happens is we'll put a gate there so that the gate helps us to shut down whatever frequency we don't want to come into the signal. Do you understand? So let me give you a typical illustration. Will be so the guitar. So the rock guitar, there's this tone that is called the distortion. So the distortion has a lot of overtone on it that if not properly gated, it can bring you unwanted noise, unwanted sound. Do you understand? So what happens is you have to understand the length of each of its tone so that it is placed subtly so that it takes away every unwanted tone. Do you understand? So I would like to say that let me give you a typical illustration, right? So let's say from the hiss sound of every so let's say the hiss sound from every what's it called now? From every device, it might take a while. Sorry, I'm just reading a question that someone just asked. He said that means for a strong basis, if I don't want the strong strike to enter, I will have to do a slow attack, yes, and do a fast or slow release depending on what I want to in a particular music. Exactly. So if you remember, we talked about the compressor. So the compressor can help you even out the strength of the basses. Do you understand? So that you don't get that heavy honk noise that comes like that. So if you put a compressor and then put a time that the compressor can trap that particular transient of that heaviness of the tone, it can even it out. And also the compressor, the gates can help you also even out and smoothen in the playing of the basses. So whatever intensity the basses plays on, whatever stroke the basses plays on, it's you can also determine how well it gets to you and how well your audience get to hear it. You understand? So as an audio engineer or as a live sound engineer, what happens is yours is to make sure that the audience get to hear or your end user get to hear the audio in the clearest form possible. You understand? So it's a good one. That's a good question there. It came from Adebisi Shegun. Thank you very much for that question. So let me give you a typical example. So if you notice in one instrument that has the tendency for there to be an overtone, that has the tendency for there to have a delayed decay time for each of these elements, is the drums. So if you check the cymbals, you play the cymbals, it just keeps resonating continuously like that. You play the tom, boom, it keeps resonating. You play the key, boom, it just keeps resonating. Every of the element of the drum has this overtone. So I think, okay, in my own opinion, the gate is very essential in the mixing of the drums, right? So your ability to be able to implement it right will give you a very good tone without any bleed or overtone of any element of the drums. So let's say the drums, the toms you play boom. If you check, that's the natural resonation of the tom. So it keeps resonating because it's two elastic surface, the upper surface and the bottom surface of the the vellums of the thumb, and then trapped in between is air molecules that keeps bombarding the surface of the the top surface and the bottom surface continuously like that. It just keeps resonating boom, 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 boom continuously until there's a point for it to stop. The thing is, it does not stop, but on the other end of the audio signal that is treated by the audio engineer or the sound engineer, what happens is you now determine how the length or the decay time per se of the tone, so that you don't allow the undesired one, which is the noise, to come in and then cover every other thing. Let's just say for instance, let's say let me show you something. Let's just say for instance, we have the tom, let's say tom 1 and then tom 2. Let's say this is the exact, not the exact for safe, sorry about that. Let's say this is the tone of the tom. That's first tom. This is the tone of the second tom. They are struck at 2 different times. Let's say this is a graph that shows that the input tom was struck at some time at 0.1 milliseconds. The second tom was struck at some point on let's say 0.9 milliseconds, right? If we check, as at when the second tom is being played, the first tom has not been totally decayed, has not been totally dissipated. That the energy of the first tom has not been totally dissipated, right? Then let's say they now play let's say the floor tom. So the floor tom signal comes in somewhere here, right? If you notice, at this point, there is the residue from the tone of the first tom, and from the tone of the second tom, and from the tone of the floor tom. At this point, what you're going to hear will be noise. So the way you kill this excess tone is to apply the gate, right? Applying the gate will allow you truncate the excess tone and then make for this tone to be 1, having the transient loud, allowing for the length of the tone, the decay, to come in before the gate shuts, before the next tone and the next tone of the second tom and the floor tom. Do you understand? So so what will happen is, sometime by next week, what I will do is I'll bring in a mixer so that you can see the live representation of all that we have talked about in the previous weeks, which is the compressor, the gate, and the EQ. Then we will implement each of them so that you can see how it works. But at this point, with all that we have talked about in the last 30 minutes, I think you should be able to implement the gate dependent on what you want to achieve out of every audio signal that you meet. So one thing is, the gate can also help you quiet your input recordings, right? So that whatever comes in will come in as the signal, that is the input signal, without the noise. What happens is the threshold, you place it above the noise so it keeps it quiet, right? And then put the attack time to be fast, so that the moment the signal hits, it opens almost immediately, so that a part of the tone is not truncated, right? It's not taken out of it. And then if it goes below it, so that you don't get to hear the noise come in anytime at all, you have to maybe make the release time faster, so that at the moment it falls below the threshold, the gate is closed. Do you understand? So a simple analogy will be, open the gate, which is fast open, which is the attack, or slow open, which is the attack time on fast attack time, and they keep it open for the length of time, which is the the length of time that it takes for it to stay open, and then the close time, right? Which is the release time. Okay. Okay. Okay, so I would like to maybe do a Q&A session in the next time. The next time we'll have this tutorial, say next week, this same time next week. So we'll have a live mixer and then audio signal through to it so that we can discuss one-on-one. You can ask it direct questions on yeah. So okay, I have a question here. Someone is asking, is it possible for the compressor to help in reducing excess tone of the tom instead of using the gate? Yes, it is possible. So what will happen is, what you would have done is to squash the excess tone. So if I do my attack time to be, so I think this person is pulling us back to the compressor. Let's say I do an attack time. If you remember, I talked about that the compressor also can squash off the sound. So let's say if we do an attack time to be behind the time of the transient. That is, you get the transient, right? Then you put the attack time behind the transient. Do you understand? So the compressor kicks action, but the action of the compression will only work when it sees that the attack time is saying work almost immediately or delay to this point in time before you work. So if the attack time is delayed, what will happen is the transient would have gone through, then the tail part of the tone will be acted upon by the compressor. So if I have told the compressor to totally squash off, and I have put a ratio that is infinity is to 1, right? If I put a ratio that is infinity is to 1, what happens is the moment the tone has gone through and my compressor is delayed, what happens is it immediately crushes off these guys. But the sound will not be all right.